Whether your suspect has a small paper cut or a bunch of gunshot wounds, this is how you keep your suspect in custody while they're being medically treated in ERLC. First, let's briefly discuss what Bedwatch means and the different ways it is used. Bedwatch basically is where your prisoner, aka the suspect you took into custody, is in a hospital setting outside of the jail. The prisoner is your responsibility, and it is your job to make sure the suspect doesn't escape while in the hospital. Some departments may switch custody to the sheriff once the suspect is in the hospital. However, most departments will require you to stay with your suspect from arrest all the way until you bring them to jail. The types of bedwatches that are the most common can be divided up into 3 sections: critical, non-critical, and urgent. We are now going to give explanations and examples of these 3 sections. For our first example, of course, we'll be using non-critical. This is still going to require a code 3 response from EMS. Let's just say your suspect falls down the stairs and absolutely demolishes their legs. You still have to call EMS for them after, of course, you secure the building. In addition, you have to secure your suspect because you never know if they may be faking it. Because there are plenty of suspects who will fake an injury just to catch you off guard. But after you secure your suspect and make sure they're cuffed up, you call for the megs, call for EMS, let them do their diagnostics, and once he's in the stretcher, of course, you cuff him up to the stretcher because once again, you cannot have this guy escaping. Once you arrive at the hospital, make sure you turn off your lights. Don't stay behind the ambulance because you may be there for a couple hours while the doctors make sure to stitch him up or do whatever they have to do. Once again, this isn't life-threatening, but at the same time, it's still something that they need to go to an emergency room for. And once again, once they get to the hospital, you want to make sure that you either cuff them up to the hospital bed, or if they don't seem like a flight risk, you can just leave them uncuffed. But either way, you have to keep your eyes on this suspect his entire hospital stay, his entire duration, until the doctor medically discharges him. Now that your suspect has been medically discharged from the hospital, you can bring him on over to your car, or if you have multiple officers at the hospital, if it's a little bit busier, then you can have another officer help you with your bedwatch. Meanwhile, you bring your car up to the emergency bay doors. And then, of course, you do what you would do if you just took them right off the street, which is bring them on down to jail. And whether they're critical, non-critical, or urgent, all 3 of these, this is the same steps. You take them on down to jail, you book them in, and you give them on over to the jailers where they can get properly booked. Our second example is this scenario right here. You got a suspect, you hit him with a beanbag, and he's complaining about pain afterwards. This also could apply to taser probes or anything else like that, but this is basically something that you wouldn't necessarily need an emergency room for. Something could be handled in an urgent care setting as opposed to a big old emergency room, but you have to do your due diligence. This suspect is yours, and if he gets injured or has any sort of internal injuries that aren't visible to the naked eye on the outside, you could be on the hook. You could have your department end up being sued due to bad treatment. So either way, though, you gotta do your due diligence. You have to be safe rather than sorry. So you go on over to the hospital. And of course, you don't need to respond lights and sirens because this isn't an emergency. It's an urgent scenario, but still isn't an emergency scenario. So he gets taken on over the hospital, driving through regular traffic. You stop at all your red lights, you stop at your stop signs, you follow every single traffic rule, taking this guy over to the hospital. This also applies to mentally ill suspects who have to be taken to a mental hospital. You don't need to go code 3. Their mental stability is not going to change just because they're in the back of an ambulance. So you go over there regular as possible. The public may not even know that you're transporting a person. And of course, after you're done with this transportation and they get medically discharged, they are going straight to jail. There is no passing go. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. No matter how injured a suspect is, as long as they're alive and breathing, they will be taken to jail after their hospital visit and medical stay. Our third type of bedwatch is the most important one because, as you can see, our suspect brought his gun up and got absolutely lit up by the arresting officers. But this is all criticals. This is all sort of trauma, injuries involving gunshot wounds, car crashes after vehicle pursuits, or any sort of trauma like that. You of course need to make sure your suspect is secured because you never know when they could be faking. The adrenaline is pumping in these types of scenarios, so they may have a little bit of extra effort and a little bit of extra energy to fire one extra shot off at you and make you that officer down. So never turn your back to the suspect. Always keep the suspect in one officer's sights at all times, and you want to make sure that when he's being transported, you have all officers on deck ready to go in case he tries anything at all. And of course, because this is a gun gunshot wound suspect because this suspect fired shots at officers and was ready to murder an officer. You have to make sure that there's an officer riding in the back of that stretcher with him or in the back of that ambulance with him. You of course want to keep him restrained and cuffed to the stretcher, and at all times, once again, keep eyes on him. This is time sensitive for the medic because they're trying to get him to a trauma center as quickly as possible, and also time sensitive for you because more than likely any sort of trauma injury, you're going to be stuck there for the rest of your shift. You may even be there at the next shift, or someone could be nice and pick up your shift for you, but either way, this guy is going to be in the hospital for a long time, so say bye-bye to the rest of your shift. Also, this is going to be one of the few times where the hospital will allow you to leave your cruiser parked in the back of the ambulance area because they want to keep you and your partner on that suspect at all times. This guy is an attempted murderer. He may be ready to take a life, so they want to make sure that security is top-notch and top tier. In addition, of course, this guy's going to be going on into surgery, so once he's in surgery, then you can move your car afterwards. But the whole time you want to maintain eyes on your suspect, make sure that he's as restrained as can medically be without hindering the medical crew, and at the same time, once again, you don't want this guy escaping.